How we feeling tonight? I know y'all got more than that. I'm sorry. How we feeling tonight? Awesome. Welcome everyone to Busboys and Poets Books. We are so excited to be hosting this forum about black health. It's black mental health. Black health is important too, y'all. Go to the doctor. But today we're talking about mental health, something that I personally hold very dear to me, and I hope you guys will as well. This is an important topic that is long overdue for our stage. To start us off, I'm going to introduce the woman who brought us all together, Miss Marita Golden. She is, yeah, give it, yeah. Miss Marita Golden is the award-winning author of over 20 works of fiction and nonfiction. Her most recent book is The New Black Woman Loves Herself, Has Boundaries, and Heals Every Day. She has taught creative writing at major universities, including George Mason, Virginia Commonwealth U, Johns Hopkins, and the University of the District of Columbia. She co-founded the Zora Neale Hurston Richard Wright Foundation, yeah, and serves as President Emeritus. As a literary consultant, she teaches writing workshops and offers editing and manuscript developments. And I'm going to go ahead and kick it over to you.
in the U.S., black U.S. doctors simply vanished. And in this piece, she writes about the fact that in the 1920s, there was a report written by a man named Abraham Flexner, who was an education specialist at the turn of the 20th century. He was employed by the Carnegie Foundation and the AMA to go around and look at all the medical schools in the country and impose standards on them to ensure that they were all, operating as they should. Now, he had strongly racist opinions on the role of black people in medicine. He wrote that black students should be trained in hygiene rather than surgery, and were best employed as sanitarians who can help protect white people from common diseases such as tuberculosis, so there was no need for them to be trained as doctors. After the Flexner report, 5 of the 7 black medical schools in the United States were forced to close, which left only Howard University and Mahara. Now recently, the author said that on her Twitter feed, an article popped up that talked about the impact of that report. And it estimated that if those schools had been able to continue training black doctors to this day, they would have educated roughly 25,000 to 35,000 people as medical professionals. In essence, tens of thousands of future black physicians disappeared. And so when we talk about the crisis, in black health, of course, we're talking about a situation that was designed. And before we open discussion, I just want to read a little section from my book, which, as I said, was written during COVID and is a personal exploration of the strong black woman complex. I talked to doctors, therapists, and I especially talked to black women who had hurt and who had healed, women who had been in therapy, because I wanted to give them a voice. And they very generously shared their stories with me because they knew this was going to go in a book and they knew the power of books. I'm going to read a couple of paragraphs where I'm writing about my journey from strong black woman to what I call new black woman. Like many black women, I will tell you that I never saw my mother cry. Memory is so fickle, so malleable, and has been proven to be in scientific studies of it so unreliable that we now know that pretty much everything we think we remember may be partially or totally false. Of course I saw my mother cry when she saw my father angrily walk out the door after an argument at her mother's funeral. However, cry becomes a synonym for being unafraid to admit to confusion, weakness, to plead for help, for the ability of mothers to say to their children, I don't know what to do. Many of us have seen our mothers pray on their knees, and they have taught us to do the same. But when they pray, they're supplicants expecting an answer, a remedy from a mystical, mysterious force that's gained their allegiance because they're so deeply unknown and unknowable. When they place their hands on our trembling shoulders, look into our frightened eyes, and say the words, I don't know what to do, there's no expectation of immediate relief, only a willingness to submit to the darkness of the unknown and a determination to stumble through it. The strong black woman mask is diabolical and dynamic. It becomes reflexive and theatrical. Even as we convince ourselves that it fits us perfectly, it feels more like the grip of a snare, a kind of emotional neuroplasty that allows us to absorb higher and higher levels of pain. Endurance is proof of our strength. We don't have to remove the mask, just adjust it around the edges or find a larger size until the mask disintegrates, turns to ash, as all lies must in the end. The mask unremoved can irreparably harm the relationships we most care about. I felt nearly invincible wearing my mask. As a writer, my job and my calling were to control the narrative. And that's what the mask allowed me to do. Control the narrative I presented to the world. I was a black woman and had no other choice. Sometimes I felt like I'd been born wearing the strong black woman mask. It was part of the required uniform as I taught at a historically white university, as I raised my son against a cacophony of voices that relentlessly questioned my competence as a single mother. And so, in the book, I write about journeying to a place where I could remove my mask, ask for help, create sustaining systems of physical and mental health. So I want to begin with you, William. I want to ask you two things. Looking at where we are now in terms of, this mental health crisis. I mean, I hate to talk about statistics because when it comes to black folk, they're so depressed. But these statistics are really quite telling. 4% of psychologists in America are black. 2% of psychiatrists in America are black. 7% of marriage counselors are black, and 22% of social workers are black. So as a person who heals black people, your clients, and other people as well, what do you see looking at the mental health situation now? What solutions would you suggest? And what do people come to you? What do they present to you?
Is this on? Okay. Let me just first give thanks to Black History Month to acknowledge Solomon Carter Fuller, who's the first African American psychiatrist. And it's, what did he do? And it's known not so much for his clinical care, but he was working in the laboratory of a guy called Alzheimer's. And there was a nice article in the Post about that recently, that discovered these neurofibrillary tangles that occurred in the brain. And these fibrillary tangles, of course, is the biological basis for Alzheimer's. So he made a tremendous basic finding in terms of research in addition to his clinical care. And it also fits in, I think Flexner got a bad rep because many of his views were actually accepted by some folks in our community. It was based on the old concept of when we become successful in working with our hands, whereas white folks become successful in working with their brains. And this, by the way, concept is still very much is what we're seeing. When I first started working, I was former chair at Howard University. First thing I came in and said, okay, let's publish more. And some of the folks wanted to run me out of town because they said, what in the world? We're not into that. And folks faculty story, we're not into that. It's changed now, but that was the belief. And it also, this is, sounds unrelated, but it isn't. Got a list of the number, you're talking about number of black billionaires. There are 9 black billionaires, 7 of them are in sports and entertainment. And I don't think that's an activity. Why is it that our scientists and our industry people, our business, why aren't they up there as well? And as one young man who's 5 feet tall told me he's going to be another Michael Jordan or Will Chamberlain, I said, we've gotten the message that very well, that it's a sin even to go into entertainment and sports, but not into science and technology. And that, I think, contributes to a lot of what we're seeing in terms of what do we do of getting help for mental health. And I'll just give one experience that I had when I first started medical school. We talk about how the numbers look down in terms of the problems we have, but I was told One of my faculty told me, "You lucky folks, black folks are lucky." I said, "Why? You don't get depressed." I said, "Son of a gun." And found out now it's held widely by white folks, but also it was discussed on TV as well. We have such toughness. We have gotten through slavery and take care of anything, so we don't get depressed. We don't kill ourselves, even though substantial numbers in the middle passage jumped overboard when they saw that they were being taken from their home country. And these kinds of things contribute, not just in terms of the whole concept of racism and so forth, but in terms of our community. We've been fed the story that somehow mental issues and mental disorders is not us, it's everybody else. And I made the point that, we had the coronavirus, and everyone said, "Oh my gosh, we got more anxiety now." And it was more black folks are more likely to die during the epidemic than other people. But also there was a substantial increase in the number of people who had depression, anxiety, the suicide rate went up, and right now, the death rate from opioid overdose also went up. And I was told Dr. Chapman, I don't see him yet. But anyway, the point is that I don't think these are all unrelated. These are all tied in the same phenomena. We're now beginning the coronavirus now exposed the terrible disparities that exist in our community. The pressure on it, recognizing that we have substantial areas in which we aren't providing these kinds of services. You heard the issues about the number of medical schools. We got the same number of black doctors, especially men, that we did in the 1960s. They haven't increased. And if you want services, you won't be able to find them because they aren't there. They're not there. And the post-pay, they disappeared. Well, I'm saying that a lot of them weren't there in the first place. And that is the challenge that we're facing. And what happens if you do need mental health services, physical health services? And I tend not to separate mental and physical health. I mean, it's all in the same basket, same people. What happens when you have these services? How can you get help? Then the argument can be, well, maybe you don't need help. Maybe we're so tough with the treatments that we have are irrelevant. It's hard to know because even in doing the research, and I'm primarily a researcher, I've been trying to find new treatments for our problems. The limiting factor is that we do not participate in those trials. When they develop new treatments, black people aren't included. And as a result of this, we don't necessarily know how to get the true answers that's going to be effective for our community. So we got a triple challenge. One is to encourage that our folks become aware of what needs to be done in terms of the problems that really do exist in our community. Two, recognize that these mental problems as well as these physical problems count as much in terms of the lower life expectancy and poor outcomes in our community. And three, begin to get involved the scientific as well as the interest in our community, and not just the researchers, in terms of developing solutions to these problems. What I do about it, part is education, getting the information out, programs like this. I was an editor of a journal, used to write these nice scientific articles, and nobody ever read them. But what I did was I pulled together some of my old editorials, pulled together, and that's the book that you have right here, is what it is. Some of my former editorials that I did for the journal. Also another book I did, Cross-Cultural Psychiatry, talked about some of the medications and the effects that they have across different ethnic groups. But that's, I think, is the start. Part of it is getting the information out, using social media, and also helping folks to recognize what is nonsense and what is based on foundations that are useful in terms of knowledge for our community. And then the other part is also, we have created some administrative barriers to keep us from being able to work together to address our problems. We're just talking to psychologists, don't talk to psychiatrists, don't talk to social workers. And then we found that many times working with people with lived experiences can be as helpful if they have guidance and direction in terms of how to approach these problems. The problems we have are substantial. At Howard University, we found that half the people in our primary care clinics had as much post-traumatic stress disorders. That's like the kind of PTSD and shell shock that you find in combat situations. And yet only 17% of them actually got referred for treatment or information. So part of it is, again, community awareness, linking our different resources together and utilizing them in a way that can really be so effective usefulness.
Thank you. Thank you, William. Yes, go ahead. Yeah, I'm so glad we have a multi-generational panel. Now, Amber and Faith are representatives of a generation that is, I think, much more likely to seek out mental health care. And I think there's a lot less of a stigma attached to it. And so, Amber, I'd like to ask you, how and why did you become a motherhood wellness consultant? And as we were talking before the program, you've actually done a lot of work studying men. So you're actually kind of a parent wellness consultant. And how does that affect mental health?
That's a great question. It is funny. I actually, when we were talking, I realized when I first graduated, I first was studying fatherhood, and then life happens and, you know, things evolve, and now I spend a lot of time thinking about motherhood. But now with the book that I just wrote, it is kind of getting back to the core of parenthood in general. But I initially started to really explore motherhood through the practice of psychology. Honestly, my lived experience of becoming a mom. You know, I've been a psychologist for about 10 years now, and I've only been a mom for about almost 5 years, and I've enjoyed my experiences as a psychologist, but then there was something about becoming a mom that really changed my perspective on the work that I was doing. And so what I realized was, as a mom myself, there was a lot of support that I needed. There were a lot of experiences that I was having that I just had never heard people talk about or really speak to. You know, it felt like these things were too private, or you know, we weren't supposed to talk about, you know, the things.
What experiences?
Mm-hmm. Depression, postpartum depression, anxiety, feeling lost. There's a lot of grief when you become a mother because your identity really shifts. Even, you know, for me, I am a very ambitious person, and so there was some grief around, okay, now that I'm a mom, how does that change my career? And so I decided that I wanted to spend a lot of time focusing on motherhood in my practice and also online talking about this as a psychologist, because I just felt like, well, if I'm having these experiences, I'm not alone. There's so many other women who are having this experience. And like you said, I think that I'm a millennial, and there's something about our generation where we now see there's a very big importance to speaking to mental health and our emotional experiences and really sharing them. Because I think many of us grew up not realizing that our parents or our mothers specifically were struggling in the ways that they were. And so I think our generation, we are kind of sharing these experiences online a lot more. We're talking about them, we're writing about them. So that's why I decided to explore motherhood through psychology and the internet. I was having an experience and I realized there were probably a lot of other women who were having that too, and we needed to talk about it.
Talk about your podcast and the community that you built.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So actually,
Talk about your podcast and the community you built.
Definitely. My podcast actually just went through a rebrand. So it originally was the Balanced Working Mom
And
podcast.
she's all over Fox News, okay? Just to let you know.
But originally the podcast was Balanced Working Mama Podcast. It's now called Dr. Amber Know and Grow Podcast. But really, it is about speaking about the well-being and mental health for mothers and parents. And so the original podcast, there's over 100 episodes. They're still all there about motherhood, about the experience of matrescence, about Black motherhood, and what we do when we're having these mental health experiences or these wellness experiences as moms. What do you do when you feel like you can only, or you're only supposed to focus on your family or your children, but you still have so many needs and you still have so many unmet needs. So I really talk about that in the podcast. And in 2022, I built a community called the Balanced Working Mama Community. And it was amazing because it was really a group of mostly Black women who were mothers who also wanted to have an experience in motherhood where they were learning how to care for themselves while they also cared for their families. And I think that's so revolutionary because as Black women specifically, I think oftentimes we get lost in the process because so much of our identity has been about how we care for other people, how we care for our children, how we care for our spouses, and sometimes the connection of, okay, well, how am I caring for myself, it gets lost. And so now what I have noticed in my practice and through that community and in writing this book is that moms now in 2024, we are very focused on, okay, there's no way that I can care for my children and my family in the way that I need to if I'm not yet caring for myself. So that's what that community is about. It's just how do we do motherhood while also acknowledging our needs, our wants, our desires, and unlearning this idea that that's selfish, because it's not, it's necessary.
What are your mental health practices? Specifically, every day.
You know what, and I paused because they're just the most subtle things. And I think that's something that, especially for moms, we have to realize. Sometimes we get really overwhelmed by this idea that I have to be running a mile every day. I have to go to the gym. I have to be going to therapy once a week. And we realistically just don't have that time. Especially when you have young children. So for me, because I do have young children, I have a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old, my mental health practices are really basic and very subtle and really built into my routines. And so for instance, I'm one where I have to wake up early because if I don't wake up first, there's no way. My kids will get up at 6 o'clock ready to go. And if I'm not up and ready myself, there's no way I can get through the day functioning well. I have to have that time for myself. So making sure that I have a routine for myself before my children start their day. I love exercise. For me, physical and mental are very much connected. And so most mornings I'm getting up and I'm just walking on my treadmill or getting on my bike because that feels good for me. I'm a really big tea drinker, so every day I have green tea, every day, because it's soothing for me and it's calming for me. And without that, I don't feel well, I don't feel hydrated. But then also it's just really the routines in my day, knowing that for me, I feel best when I feel that I know what to expect with my day, when I know my children have a routine, that helps me. And so really just thinking about what in my day helps me to feel at my best and my most comfortable, and that's really my wellness practice.
I love that. And I really love the fact that it's very simple things. Because sometimes we can get into an Olympics of, oh, I ran 5 miles a day, or, I don't eat meat, or, and we just want to be healthy. We don't want to be health Nazis, okay? So, and I think that's a regimen that works for everybody. I'm going to get to your favorite set, but I do want to ask, William, what are your health practices? What are your mental health practices?
What are my health practices?
Yeah, your mental and physical health practices, yeah.
Yeah, my mental health practice is mostly keep myself physically fit. Not a simple task. I was a wrestler, and there's very nice articles there about HBCUs closed down their wrestling teams, which I think was a tremendous detriment to our community. Fortunately, I was able to turn to judo, which helped me in another way, and became a national champion. And doing that allowed me to be able to learn how to relax, how to lose weight, how to be able to function. And in any kind of sport, you learn quickly how to work with other people, even individual sports. And so I encourage you, if you haven't become involved in sports. Recently I developed spinal stenosis, so that limited me tremendously in terms of what I can do. But then I found out that in terms of going through the physical therapy, if I hadn't learned how to exercise, I would never have gotten through it. So I encourage you to, if you have limitations, jump into physical therapy and begin to work on your body, and that will in turn strengthen your mind. And one of the biggest preventatives of dementia in old age is use that thing between your ears. Don't let it become a passive recipient for TV sets and activities. That's one of my big health practices. And also being able to recognize that if you eat, sleep healthy, that mentally you'll be much stronger in terms of dealing with life events. People tell me I can't go to bed at night, I can't sleep. So well, I lay down, I'm out. And because when I close my eyes, I shut out what's happening today, it's okay. And then I'll be ready to refresh. How am I going to address the problems later in life? And I might also, in talking about practices, my main practice in turn, I now do telepsychiatry. That is that I have a regular program, 800-400-6354, which I talk to people directly using Zoom. And for me, it's been a godsend, because running back and forth, sitting in the car, going from place to place is no fun.
You got some big knuckles, man.
Thank you.
Yeah, look at
That I also took Taekwondo as well.
And see, the great thing about exercise is like a bank account. So that you can't say, I'll never get ill, I'll never get hurt. But the strength, mental and physical, that you build up over the time of exercise really does help you recover. It adds to your resilience enormously.
One reason that judo helped me, one of the major killers of black folks is falls. Walking down the street, bang, down you go.
Why do black people fall more? Because we're not in our cars?
I think that's part of it, but also part of it is that many of us just don't exercise. Our exercise is how long can you sit on that couch and listen to some music and watch TV. And many of the falls are when we walk out and fall from a height of like 5 feet. Broken pelvis, common in many folks, or a friend of mine, the famous lawyer, just died. He got downstairs, slid outside, fell in the street. Judo helped me to learn how to fall, but it also taught me a healthy respect that when I'm standing up, make sure that I have all the support I need. Don't worry if people tell you, go out there and run around with a cane and all that stuff. It took me a long time to learn that, but I eventually learned it.
Well, I had a bad fall last summer, and the reason I had the fall after I had the fall, I realized, was because I was walking improperly. I had a tendency to walk slightly, I'll show you, walking sort of, a little forward.
Yes.
So I was looking down, is there a kitty? Is there, like I was looking for something.
Yeah.
And in Old Town, I'm walking across the street and walking to my usual and just fall flat out on my face. Luckily, I did not have a concussion, just was black and blue for a while. But I was very lucky. And so then when I got home a couple days later, my husband, who's a YouTube addict, starts looking around. And there was this black guy on YouTube who taught me how to walk properly. And this is how you walk properly. You stand up straight. And you look straight ahead. Because I thought, I have to look down. No, your peripheral vision will catch anything out there. So you walk, and my husband said, you walk like you think you're cute now. So now, at my age, I learned how to walk. And I exercise. Okay, I do everything, yoga, cardio. But because I was walking in that sort of leaning forward, and as I said, I was very lucky. I fell flat out on cement. And I know people who had that kind of fall, who had concussions, and as a result of the concussions, cannot do exercise, can't jump up and down, can only do sedentary things. So, and I think that all those years of exercise on that subject helped me in that fall. So now, Faith, your book, your wonderful book, which is a wonderful memoir, came out of COVID, and you open it so beautifully, taking us back to the trauma of that period when so many, it's almost like the deaths of Black people became a kind of pornography, where every time we looked up, there was another Black death being filmed and played over and over again. And you wrote about the emotional toll that that took on you. And I know during COVID, I began to really get serious about curating what I took in. And I just realized that, I actually don't have to look at every police video of a Black person being killed. But I don't have to look at anything that disturbs me. So talk about the book, and I'm going to read a little bit from it, and then your health practices.
So I decided to write Remember Me Now as a love letter to Black women, because I felt that, especially during 2020 when we saw what happened to Breonna Taylor, we saw a lot of people celebrating her and remembering her and her death and the drawings of her on magazine covers. And I just remember thinking, it's so interesting that as a Black woman, she's being so celebrated in her death. But as Black women, when you were alive, people are not very interested in celebrating you right now.
Yes, yes.
And I thought, what would it be like for us to truly celebrate and remember Black women right now while we are here? And that really inspired me to write this love letter, to celebrate our existence, to talk about how we are not just, our products of our pain or of our trauma, but also how we can overcome and how we can really just blossom through a lot of these situations. And there's just so much beauty that I feel like we hold as Black women, and that's what I wanted to highlight here. And when it comes to my own practices, like Amber, I like to get up early in the morning just to start my day off, to have peace, to think, to journal, and it's just something about it that gives me a bit of a reset in a way. So I know that I'm going to come into my day from a peaceful standpoint, and then I also enjoy walking, keeping it simple. If I think too hard about exercise and doing a HIIT class or something, you lost me. But if I am just going to walk outside or walk with my dog, it's a place for me to feel some deep peace, and I can just mentally process how I'm feeling. And also I like walking outside, so taking in, just enjoying the weather, looking around my neighborhood, those are things that I find great peace from. So, is it okay if I read my, okay. So I'm gonna read you all a little section in my book, and it's a little bit about healing and then a piece of a letter that I wrote. The journey of healing leads us down paths of self-discovery we'd never find if we remained in denial. Healing helps us discover an authentic version of ourselves, one that may be marked by pain but isn't marred by it. I get teary when I think about the fact that I'm still trying to figure out who I am to myself, but I am committed to the journey, and I am brave. I am brave for realizing I don't have to do everything. I am brave for realizing I deserve rest. I am brave for freeing myself of obligations. I am brave for setting boundaries. I'm brave for staying in my body during conflict. I am brave for betting on myself and pursuing my dreams. I am brave for leaning into the healing that comes when my niece and nephew call me baby and they hug my neck and tell me stories from their day. I am brave. And this is a special letter that I wrote to my sister who needs to remember herself. Sis, I am with you. I have a feeling that life may have dealt you some bad cards, and like me, you found yourself hanging on to the edge of a life raft, trying to stay afloat. Sis, you are not weak for choosing to feel your feelings and acknowledge the painful memories you tried to keep at bay. You are not weak for being honest about your mental health. You are not weak for asking for help. You do not have to uphold the strong Black woman trope. And even here, in your most painful moments, your tender heart can rest. And some days, the journey to choosing yourself feels lonely. And some people don't possess the capacity to see you beyond what you do for them. You have put your needs aside for far too long. And you must press on regardless of who agrees with your decisions. Truth is, no one but you can hear the cry within the depths of your soul. Sometimes the voice is a whisper, and other times it's loud, as if the woman within is begging you to tend to her wounds. You don't have to solve everyone else's problems at the risk of your own health. My dear sister, during your darkest moments, you can still feel joy and pain and hurt and hope, all in the same breath. Don't run away from moments of joy. Embrace them. Don't run away from moments of pain. Feel them. You can do both. You don't have to choose between the two. By acknowledging your pain, you open the door for greater inner peace. Find a community that will see you, believe in you, surround you with love, and affirm you. You cannot heal in isolation. My sisters were the midwives who helped birth me into a new season. And at a time when I felt misunderstood and rejected, my sisters asked me what the whispers of my soul were saying. They showed me a path to freedom and self-acceptance. My sisters who are older than me showed me the way of abundance and reminded me of the beauty awaiting me when I choose to surrender my will and trust that when I leap, the divine will guide me as I venture into the unknown. I pray you find sisters that will help you find a way back to yourself.
I love that phrase, who I am to myself. I really love it. And your health practices?
So for me, for my mental health practices, I have a therapist that I absolutely love, that I've had since I was 25 years old, and I've stayed with the same one. And it has been a transformative experience for me. So maintaining therapy and cultivating that practice in my life has meant a lot to me. And also just surrounding myself with good community and people that I can lean on and connect and talk to. One of my best friends is here over there. We've been friends since college, and just having a good group of women surrounding me has been really instrumental in my own personal mental health. And for me, it's intergenerational. So it's women that are my age, women that are younger than me, women that are older than me. Like, it is very important to me to learn from those around me. I love my grandparents. I'm really close to them. So sitting at the feet of my elders, because they have taught me so much about life. And when I feel really overwhelmed and stressed, they help to ground me and remind me that we've been here before, you're just fine. And I feel like that is like so necessary, especially in the age of social media. And there's so many different things that like you can consume all at once, and you have to really decide, you know, much like you were saying earlier, Marita, I don't have to watch that, or I don't have to pay attention to that. What do I need for myself? And so those are small things, but like things that have been really significant in my own mental health practice, and journaling, for sure, is a big one.
Good.
Will you be my grandmother? You heard that. I write in the New Black Woman. I actually start in the New Black Woman writing about silence and how important meditation and practicing periods of silence, days of silence, has been in terms of connecting me with my inner Marita my intuition, my soul. And I've been meditating for a while, and I was kind of in crisis around some issues in my career. And I said, wait a minute, you gotta do better than this. And I started going to a retreat center outside of Philadelphia for weekends of silence. And it's a beautiful thing. And the beautiful thing about silence is you don't have to go to a mountaintop. You don't even really have to go to a retreat center outside of Philadelphia. Some days I would wake up and inform my husband, shh, you need that. I'm having a quiet day. My last quiet day was a couple of weeks ago when I checked into a hotel. And after going to the bookstore and browsing, and into the library and reading, and then I checked into a hotel, and the fact that I was silent, I could hear something beautiful that I needed to do in terms of my writing. Some days I'll just be silent within the context of a regular day, shopping at Wegmans, working on the computer, but within I am still, I'm contemplative. And that has been a powerful source. It has made me my best friend. So I wake up in the morning, I meditate, and I have certain mantras that I do, and setting boundaries, saying no is a big part of my mental health practice. Saying no to what I don't want to do, no matter who I'm saying it to,
Right.
and yes to what I want to do, and celebrating myself. I'm bad, okay? And I don't mind feeling that. One of the most powerful things I did, when I turned 50, which is a while ago, and I decided that I had to make peace with my body. And I got naked and stood in front of the mirror and just looked at my body and accepted everything about it. The scars, the skin legs, the this, the that, the other. And from that point on, I said, okay, no more makeup. You're gonna put some lipstick and smile on your face and go meet the world. And these kinds of things, they're just things that you do ordinarily, because little things, subtle things are part of my practice. And joy. I think joy is so important. You know, feeling joy, and not because anything happened, but just feeling joy. And it's very important for me to laugh. I mean, my husband and I have different senses of humor. And he'll come in the bedroom and I'm laughing. He said, oh my God. I said, look, I'm happy, bye. You know, but I have to get my laugh on. I have to get my laugh on. So these are things that are just sort of woven through my life that I consider my mental practice, my mental health care. So now, I have more questions for you, but let's open it up to you all. Do you have any questions for any of us? Because we're coming from a number of different perspectives, and you might have different questions.
I've got a mic, so just put your hand up. Hello, thank you all for being there. So I have a question for Dr. Amber. I know you spoke about having a routine and how that's important for you and your kids. And what I'm learning is that, you know, embracing the uncertainty of like the day and also listening to your body. So how are you able to balance the two? Because I've also learned that it's a fine line between giving yourself grace and also having self-discipline.
That's a great question. That is a really good question. It's funny, actually, I just finished a podcast episode about that on my podcast. It's actually episode 105, I believe, if you go to it. I literally just wrote about this. And the story behind it was that, you know, I am someone, I love routine. I am a routine queen. My children always know what's coming next, and so do I, and that makes me really comfortable. But then, of course, when you're a mom and you have kids, things happen that are unexpected, and you can't control them. And your your children will do and say things that are unexpected. You can't control your children, no matter how much people want you to believe that you can. You just can't. And so recently we had a snow day here. You all probably remember it snowed a few weeks ago. And me and my family had a snow day. And that was a moment for me where I had to realize, okay, I love my routines. They work really well for my family. But this is a day that's asking me to just embrace the flow of life. And so, honestly, I think for many women and mothers, that balance can be really hard, but I think you have to, actually going to what Marita was saying a bit, having those spaces for quiet and meditation on a frequent basis help you to tap into what you're needing in a given moment. And I think the more that we're connected to ourselves and our intuition and our bodies, you'll be able to know what type of day do I need. Do I need a day that's a little bit more structured? Do I need a day where I'm just going with the flow? Does this need to be a day where I'm canceling things because I actually just need more rest? I think that is really the key, because every day will look different. For some of us, some of our days are going to be very, very structured, and then other days will need to be more free-flowing. And I think it does go back to the core of, are you able to even hear what your body is telling you, what your mind is telling you? And if you can't hear it, that's probably where to begin. Because your body will always tell you what it needs, and your mind will too, but if we can't hear it because we have been so busy or we haven't taken the time for mindfulness or meditation, that's where we can get lost.
Yeah, and a lot of this slow down. We're always rushing, always have something to do. And on that snow day or that day where the shower's broken and you've got to find, chill, just okay. The plan you had, forget that. You have a new plan. And just go with that. And that's something we need to learn. It's very interesting. I was listening to the radio in the car today, and on Monday, Jen White on WMU is going to do a segment on doing nothing. Should be interesting.
That should be. And to add one more thing to that, in the spirit of mental health, we can't forget about anxiety. I think sometimes many of us might have anxiety. Some of it could rise to the level of being a clinical anxiety, but that can also keep us feeling like we can't hear ourselves, because there's so much rumination or so many thoughts that are really just worries and concerns that need to be addressed. And so that's something too, if you're finding it hard to really find that balance of how do I balance the routine, but then also going with the flow, it could be that there's some anxiety that needs to be addressed as well. So of course, mental health care can be helpful with that.
Yeah, it's easy to say, be silent. But if when you are silent, you hear the voice of demons and pain and untreated trauma, you simply cannot be silent. And that is when you need support, mental health support, so that you can heal and find the resilience and the restorative power of silence. And just a word about therapy. I thought it was I really love that you said, you've had a therapeutic relationship for a decade. That's great. It's funny, the Woody Allen, the actor and director, I remember he had a therapist for like 25 or 30 years. And I said, look, he needs a friend. He just needs a friend, not a therapist. But more and more, people need what they need. And just a point about therapy, at 3 different points of important passage in my life, I have sought out a mental health professional. The first one was a white woman, the second one was a black woman, and the third was a white man. So I think I'm all for cultural sensitivity. I think that's really important, and I want there to be more black therapists. But there are culturally sensitive white folks who have helped me heal.
I've been coming, my wife is Marita, I've been coming to these kind of things for a long time. When I used to come, in the old days, there were no men. Now I see a lot of young men, middle-aged men, I can't believe it. That's the first thing I want to say. Now that they have affirmative action, they got rid of that. I didn't see you being replaced. I've seen no black males or Hispanic males coming and taking your position. If they close down the doors to all those other colleges, do you think, and even the predominantly black colleges, there have been other people coming there too. So where the black man gonna go? And his sisters too.
You know, where's the black man gonna go with you?
Yeah, so that, I think you raised an excellent point. I'm old enough to remember back in the 50s, 60s, when we were all fighting for integration. So we could be integrated, all the problems would be solved. But for instance, when I go back to the school that I went back to, that I went to, I have people now saying, you know, I had this white teacher who did this, and this. I didn't have that experience. I didn't have any white teachers. I didn't see any white teachers until I was in college.
Wow.
So, yeah, that was the
I know what you
universe.
mean.
That's right. And we tend to forget it. On one hand, there was an exchange, there was a trade-off. Obviously, we didn't get all the resources and other things that we could have got for education. For instance, I had to go take a correspondence course to be able to get the physics that I needed to get in medical school. Because we didn't think, I guess, that black folks needed that kind of knowledge. But on the other hand, I think that as we begin to change the rules a little bit and start looking at issues like affirmative action and so forth, we need to look at what our goals are. I think our goal is not to be how much can we be like white folks or whatever. We need to look at what can we do to empower our community. And we tend, I think often we tend to forget that we sacrifice our community in terms of being able to see what we can get from the larger culture. There's a lot in our culture that we can learn, and I'm appreciating more and more as I get older. There's a lot that I learned from growing up, being in an African American community that I can't get anywhere else. And so when I talk to young men, my son keeps telling me, how many dinosaurs did you see when you grew up? I kind of to recognize that there is something that can be gotten from other folks, from the elders and so forth, that is useful. And that has made it so that we didn't have to destroy ourselves to become successful. Right now, unfortunately, I think we have too many folks who do not have a spiritual or transcending experience in the past to give them a sense of self. And as a result, they end up getting involved in destructive situations, drug overdose, shooting each other because of that. So where are our young men? Our young men, I think, we need to reinforce in them the value of themselves. That you can be a black man and also have a sense of worth and also have a sense of meaning in our society. You don't have to, you act crabs and jump on everybody that's trying to jump on the basket. But look at where you are now. So, you know, the point is an excellent one. And I think now, especially now, we have to negotiate between how do we deal with a culture that is anti-spiritual, technically advanced, versus a spiritual experience that many of us had in terms of a more spiritually based, inclusive culture that can be very effective.
Yes, one more question. I have a question right here in the corner. And then it goes out to everyone in the panel, but I really resonated with the idea of that quiet time, giving yourself that quiet time, and also being your best friend. I am my best friend. I am a mother of 4. I'm in my 50s, and I find that even in my quiet times, my best friend won't allow me to be quiet. How do I not necessarily combat with her, but to let her know that when I say quiet, I really mean I need you to be quiet.
I think that, yeah, I think you're talking about like the monkey mind that is sort of always going. I find that you simply Even if you have to do it 50 times, you go back to the quiet. You go back to the quiet. And you may feel that, wow, that was a really ratchet meditation session. But in actuality, there was more silence, there was more stillness. I think a lot of times we equate, we're not really talking about silence, the absence of noise, the absence of sound. We're talking about stillness. And stillness, we're going to hear our breath. Stillness, we're going to hear our thoughts. And yet, we can be still. And so a lot of people, when they're doing meditation, they're always, oh God, that was an F meditation. That was a D- meditation. But as long as you have sat for some period of time, your body still, your breathing, that's what you need. It's not an Olympic sport. And your brain is not, okay, you want to be still? You want to stop, die. Okay, that's when the noise will stop. So I think that we have these weird ideas about what meditation is. It's not complete silence. Your brain's on, but if you're breathing, if your body's still, you are getting a lot more contemplative rest than you really think. And if a doctor hooked you up, heart-wise, a doctor would tell you that your blood pressure is going down. So it's not an Olympic sport. Just be still.
And what I was going to add to that too is some core tenets of mindfulness and meditation is non-judgmental observation, really.
Yeah.
And so it's not about quieting your brain, because when you say that, it makes me think, okay, there's something you're trying to control, right? You're trying to control your internal experience, and when we know that there are so many things about ourselves or about our environments that we cannot control, but the gift of mindfulness and meditation is that you get to just be non-judgmental in observing what's going on for you internally. But then also when you kind of extrapolate that, it kind of helps you also to reflect on what areas in my life am I trying to control things that I cannot control, right? And so I would say for you, just sitting with yourself, like Marita said, and no focus on trying to quiet your mind, but rather how can you just be compassionate and observe your mind. And you don't have to engage with it, but really just non-judgmental observation is really helpful. And the process of trying to force your brain to be quiet can be more stressful. So
Just like a black woman, strong black woman while meditating.
right, it's like
You will be quiet.
willing your brain to be quiet is like, it's not gonna work. So non-judgmental observation, and the more you do that, it just helps you to become more compassionate and to give yourself more grace to yourself first, and then others people as well.
And that's so important, non-judgmental. God, we spend 24 hours a day judging ourselves. And yet we want to meditate, but can't stop judging.
And I know it's jumping on my soapbox. Some of you know I'm a psychopharmacologist. We do a lot of work on psychopharmacology. But at the same time, I think that one of the worst things that's happening in our culture today is the idea that you can gain some sort of inner peace by using street drugs. And what we've got now is large numbers of our folks. I mean, there are more people dying from street drugs than dying from COVID. Why? Not because people are being evil or the criminal justice system say these folks are just don't have any self-control. Folks are trying to peace. But yet we hear that managing drugs is, they have different effects at different dosages, and you're trying to do something out the street. You have no control. It's easy to jump from what is peaceful and euphoric into a pit that's going to lead you right to death. So, an excellent point there. One way to quiet your mind is to kill yourself. And I'm saying that is probably not the best way to do it. So, recent work showing that even when you die, the brain still going to go back to. So, the bottom line is there are alternatives to using street drugs to getting personal satisfaction, peacefulness, euphoria, and other sensations. The risk is too great to try to do it without having a degree in pharmacology.
And you said the streeters want the legal drugs. The legal drugs are on the street, and the street drugs are legal.
That's right.
Yeah, exactly. Michelle, you have a question?
Yes. Yeah.
And this is
Yes.
Michelle Pettis, and I just want to plug her for a minute. She is a health advocate. She's written a wonderful book called
Leading Large, the stories of
a Food Addict, and she writes about having a healthy body, dealing with your weight, and a lot of it starts up here.
Yeah.
And she
Yeah.
teaches classes and workshops for people dealing with that.
Thank you, Marita, for that wonderful introduction. I just want to say how much I appreciate this conversation and how meaningful it is. It is profound. But I also have this question, and I don't think we can have this conversation without talking about this, is that as we talk about and think about what the pillars of health that were mentioned, the sleep, the movement, right, the hydration, and nutrition, that none of that is separate from our mental health. It is all connected. And so I'd like you to, if you would, just unpack a little bit how what we eat impacts our mental health. All of that, we can't meditate and expect maximum results when we are poisoning our bodies and not paying attention to nutrition that is going to support us in a way that we are performing at our highest level. So if you can speak to that, I'd appreciate that so much.
Thank you. This is the fast food generation. I mean, when I was growing up, McDonald's had just been introduced, and, we'd be prowling DC on a Saturday night, going from party to party, and then on the way home, we'd stop at McDonald's once a week. But now people eat McDonald's every day. Much of the food that we eat is highly processed. When Michelle Obama wanted to change that, big food shut her down completely. And so we're living in a society that's out to kill us. I mean, really, that is really what it is. It doesn't have our best interests at heart. And that's why the things that we're talking about are so important, because we have to take our health in our own hands. We really do. And if we don't do that, I think we're conspiring with the forces that are out to kill us. They don't care if we die. There's a cure for diabetes. Will you ever see that cure? No. So there's more money in us being ill than in being well. That means that we each have to be our own nutritionist. We have to be our own therapist. So, and these are the things that we have to talk to young people about. We have to educate our 2-year-old, our 4-year-old, so that they can make healthy choices. But you're exactly right. And when you talk about Black women, a lot of us are overeating as medicine. We have untreated trauma. We're using food to make ourselves feel good. And we don't talk about that. You can't, if you have a conversation about weight, you're suddenly shaming. But no, I'm not shaming. I'm concerned about your health. Okay, how you look, I'm concerned about your health. So we don't really have spaces, I don't think, where we can really talk honestly about this, but it's a crucial conversation. What you put in your body affects you. Yeah, food's a drug.
Yeah, I want to second that. I think the reality is that there is a direct relationship. And I used to do research, we still do some of this research, showing that if you deprive the brain of certain key amino acids, a person will go into depression. And if we replace it, the depression goes away. And it's not just depression, it's a whole host of things. We're doing work now showing that there's a direct relation between diabetes and depression. And they're directly interrelated. We've also shown this for a number of different disorders. And yet at the same time, while we have this knowledge, we also have a tremendous industry that's built around encouraging people to eat that, which is frankly not very healthy. Yes, and I hear folks saying we got to eat healthy and so forth. But if you look at the news and look at how much of the advertisements that's promoting, I say real health. I say, well, go eat natural foods. It's unnatural. Much of our ads and information is to take in a lot of things that are not built for our human bodies. I was amazed, and then we got to recognize that we came from a period of time in which we had to work like demons, and as a result, they had high caloric intake, high fat from food, so forth. And we've kept a lot of those beliefs. We've kept the concept of comfort food. But we've changed. Technology and other factors mean that we sit on our butts more, we don't exercise as much, and we're discouraged. You don't want to drink too much water when you go to the bathroom too much. So all of these factors are not in the best interest of survival. And we're seeing it now. For a long time, the U.S. Life expectancy was going up, it's coming down. We're the wealthiest country now in the world in history. And yet, despite this wealth, in knowledge and in technology, we're making decisions that frankly don't make sense if you step back and look at it. So look at the little packages, tell you what's in the food, that's one of the plus signs. But at the same time, eat in moderation, combine exercise. You will not lose weight if you just don't eat because you're malnourished. You will, on the other hand, if you eat a ton of food, you will not be happier in the long run. So we got to take advantage of the technology that we have to make sure we eat healthy. The goal is to eat healthy. It's not just to feel good, and not just to lay in a carbohydrate sense. It's to come out and feel good at the end of the day so you can carry out your activities. And make sure that, and the brain needs to have proper nutrition. One of the interesting findings is that we expect that Alzheimer's and dementia were primarily genetic diseases. 50% of the variance of developing dementia is related to lifestyle. So it's not just what you're doing now and how you feel tomorrow, it's what you do in the long run.
Pet peeve. The happy, sunny commercial that advertises Ozempic. She's advertising for diabetes, and she's jumping around like she's in a musical. I hate those commercials. Hate them. Hate them. I mean, it makes diabetes like a day at the beach. No, it's a dreadful, dreadful disease. Nutrition. Half of the kids out here carjacking or being killed by other kids in this city, in this DMV, come from communities where they are ill-housed, malnourished, ill-fed, and when they go to school, how are they going to learn? So in addition to just the thing of being healthy, you can't learn if you are malnourished, if you live in a food desert, or I prefer, are a victim of food apartheid.
Yes.
Are a victim of food apartheid. And in the nation's capital, we're celebrating that east of the river, they finally got a grocery store. Give me a break. So it's so complex, and kids can't learn. And the food that they get, 90% of the kids in DC public schools get free breakfast. How much nourishment do you think is in that?
None.
Okay.
None.
So we're talking about a crisis of malnutrition across the board. Malnutrition, whether you're eating too much of the wrong things after you come from your corporate job, or you can't get the right things because your neighborhood doesn't have a grocery store. So we're really talking about, and all that goes back to the brain.
Hi, thank you guys for this panel. It's been amazing. So I'm going to state the question first and then give it context because the question is for everyone. So as you said, Dr. Golden, like we are talking about this in a safe space, and everybody here has a mindset that mental health is important and all those things. How do each of you suggest that we, those of us who want to, I always say I'm a person that gets out there and does the work and puts my boots on the ground and beats the pavement. How do we have these conversations with those who aren't interested, who don't think that mental health is important in terms of books or things that people can listen to, or just some easy sort of ways to sort of, you know, obviously everyone here I'm sure has had family members, as I do, that you've tried to have the conversation, and then they're like, oh Lord, here she comes with the conversation, or here she comes with a book or a video or something on YouTube that she done found that's like this, or she posted it. And so it's like, but we're at that point. We're at that apex point, that mountaintop point where it has to happen. And I know that's where I'm going, that's where the ancestors are taking me, and I'm sure many in this room, to be like, look, we're not going anywhere because this is important. These conversations are important. And so I'm just wondering some tips from everyone on the panel.
So when it comes to mental and physical health, I've learned a lot from my mom. My mom is a counselor, and when she was trying to encourage me in different areas of my life, mentally and physically, sometimes she would send me articles or different things like that, knowing I probably wasn't going to read it. But she would be really consistent with her encouragement and in talking to me. But one of the best things that she's always done for me is to say, what are your goals and how can I do them with you? It can be really cumbersome if you're not really at a place mentally or physically like where you want to be, or where somebody's encouraging you to be. And if the encouragement is to journey alone or to read this and figure out how you can do it, sometimes that's not where people are at. But if the encouragement is, hey, I think this could be something great for you to pursue and I'd like to do it with you, or how can I support you in this goal, that helps me, and I think it helps other people to want to take it a little bit further. So, for example, I had a goal. I wanted to walk 100 miles in 16 days. It was just like wild and crazy idea, but I really wanted to do it. And my mom always walks. She walks 3 miles a day, every day. She's done that since I was a little kid, and she used to drag me around walking with her. So I got used to that because of her. But when I said that was my goal, she was like, okay, well, I'm walking too. And even though she lives in Texas. And so it was one of those things where I never felt alone in the goal, because she said, I'm journeying with you. And so sometimes I think that that's what people need in the beginning, is somebody to journey with them. And so it kind of takes away that feeling of shame a bit when you have somebody saying, I see you and I want to do it alongside you.
So I like that. And I also love that we have a lot of different perspectives here, because when I first heard the question, my internal dialogue was, you just don't have those conversations. And what I mean by that is, I think what I heard you say is that what you do when someone is not open and they're not willing, or they're just not in a place where they're ready. And I think in my practice, what I found is I work with a lot of women who are really learning themselves in a deeper way. They're growing in ways they hadn't imagined. And they also notice that the people around them are not growing at the same pace. And that can be really distressing for them. And it's really, it can almost feel like a crisis, because it's like, this is my family. These are the people that I've grown up with for many years. This is my home. And yet I'm growing and becoming this other person, and the people around me are not moving in the same way. I think that happens a lot. And on one hand, we want to take those people along with us. We want to encourage them. We want to say, hey, this is what I'm doing. This can work for you too. We want to see them grow as well. We want them to be healthy. And we also might be able to realize that they too might have some traumas or some stressors or some mental health things that need to be addressed. for many of the people that I work with, it's obvious for them that they have a family member who has a lot of unresolved or unmet emotional needs or traumas, and for whatever reason, that family member is not ready or willing or able to go there. And so the conversation I have with a lot of the women I work with is that, okay, what is this like for you to try to have this conversation with this person who is not open right now, who is not willing and able or capable for whatever the reason is, and it's just really stressful for them. And so what we eventually come to is that you have to decide at what point do I need to change my approach, and it may mean shifting my focus to myself or the other people around me who are more open and willing and able to go on this journey with me, because it can be really hard to be talking to a brick wall when that person is just not ready. And again, I know I keep bringing up this concept of control. It's like a theme in my life all the time. We often want to control the people around us or the environments or experiences when really they are just not ready, or they may not ever be ready. And so sometimes what can happen too is that the deeper you go in your own work and your own journey, the people around you will become inspired, and when they are ready, they will know who to come to. So I would say if that's what you're feeling, you know, really go back to, okay, well, what is it that I want for myself and I need for myself? And when those people around you are ready, they are going to know who to come to. It's going to be you.
I'm not sure we don't talk about mental health prevention. In a lot of ways, we do. We were involved in an interesting study. Someone said we got a new treatment to study a group that no one has ever studied very much before. I said, oh, and what is that group? They're called women. And what we discovered is that they were not only drug companies that actually developed a medication to address the needs of women who were in the perinatal period. They didn't have their regular medications for women who became depressed when they're doing having kids, despite the fact that the rates are on like 25 to 50%. And I said, what in the world is going on? And it's a long condition that usually exclude very trials and some people study. And now got a drug, first time ever, but it shows me that there are areas in which we simply don't talk about mental health issues. The other one was when I was talking to a minister who was saying, you know, lady came to me, said she was depressed and she was taking medication and all that stuff. I said, yeah. She has to pray. Then I go away. Why does she have to get involved with city professionals and all that? And so we actually developed a program to work with ministers to try to teach them recognize that, sure, you want to, just like somebody break a leg, you can pray over to make sure that leg heals well. But you don't see it on Jesus. So also, when you become depressed, sometimes they have to bring in professional help. And explain it that way, and also find a lot of ministers that need professional help. We developed a program locally to address those issues, working with the leadership council for help the communities, something to teach ministers what is depression. In addition to that, National Medical Association, the Psychiatrists, Black Psychiatrists of America, is a intensive program to work with the religious community. Oh, I'm sorry. Work with the leadership of health, leadership council to help the communities, Black Psychiatrists of America, National Medical Association. We recognize that the religious community is one that we can partner with to try to develop these kinds of issues. There are some folks who come up there and say, you start talking about this stuff, you're trying to put God out of the way. Nope, go back and read the Bible, told what Jesus from the first psychotherapist. You can chase those demons away. So you can integrate the two and work with them, and also help people to recognize It's not simply going out and accepting a certain kind of doctrine or belief, but also looking at this as your mind is as important as your body in terms of becoming a healthier you. And to explain it that way, I found a lot of people begin to realize that this is something that they can do that can lead to better quality of life. That is, that mental problems, there's not a firewall between mental health and physical health. There's not a firewall between mental health and spiritual health. It's all the same. And we just have to work together to see how we can take techniques that's learned in one area and apply it to the others in order to get good results. We're all the same people. It's not this dualism that there's another person floating around or some spirit. We're all one entity. And then we need to look at ways of bringing those sections together.
Hi, thank you so much for this conversation. You mostly answered my first question about the conversation between spiritual, mental, and physical health, and I'm really happy to hear that you're talking about the gut microbiome and mental health, because that's sort of like a big piece that we're learning more and more about. But the question that I will ask is, for so many of us, for so many of our brothers and sisters, they say, okay, this all sounds great. So once I'm making 6 figures, right, then I can do this, right? I can, I'll have my health insurance, and I'll be able to take a mental health day, and, I'll be able to, take my child to see, a therapist who looks like them, who is trauma informed, and, all these things that we know, but it's hard to do, right? Because if you don't have the money, or you don't think you have the money, or, when you take a mental health day, then they say, okay, never come back, you've lost your job, because of course you are an essential worker who only makes, $14 an hour, no benefits, right? We remember all the essential workers who had to come in, right? When some of us were staying home and baking bread, right? Some of us were out there being essential workers and not having anything, and they were in the belly of the beast, right? So I guess I'm just really curious how we think about these issues for so many of us, so many in our community who don't have the margins in any way. They don't have the financial margins, they don't have, they don't have the good school, they don't have the ability to take their child across the city, right? Because they've got to be at work at 6 a.m. and they just hope and pray the child makes it to school on time, and they're just trying to, you understand, we all understand. So I'll stop there, but I'm just really curious to hear how we address those issues as we talk about these things that are so pressing and so needed in terms of health for our community.
Well, I think in a lot of the communities where people live that you're talking about, there are community activists who are trying to develop and stabilize and ensure the structures that would provide the kind of support you're talking about. It's just that those communities are always the first to be cut. They never benefit from long-term, perennial investment. And I think that those of us who don't live in those communities have to become more active in pressuring those who have the power to make significant changes, to make an ongoing investment. I was very pleased recently, for example, when Mayor Bowser wanted to cut the temporary food support system. Oh no, there's pushback on that, major pushback. And we need to see a lot more of that. I think also those of us who don't live in those particularly depressed communities can more often work with activists in those communities around, on the ground, this solves a problem kind of answers. I mean, for example, food apartheid. While Southeast is waiting for a grocery store, why not engage the faith communities in Southeast? Hey, anybody heard of the caravan from Southeast to the Whole Foods in Georgetown? I mean, there are creative, ordinary things that people can do, but I think, I hear what you're saying, and I think we all need, no matter our class or our background, to see this as our problem. And I think there really needs to be much more pushback when these types of programs that are started, funded, and then cut back. So I hear what you're saying, I really do, and thank you for saying it.
Yeah, I just want to, I spent some time a couple years ago in Austin, Texas, and came back to DC. Austin's fast growing city in the country, but it's also the fastest one losing black population, and there's huge disparities in terms of health care and mental health. When I looked at the whole state of Texas, ranks 51st in the country in terms of absence of mental health services. And I said, well, let me come back to the Mecca and saw the same kind of disparities. So it's not just putting money into these services, it's also letting the community know that the services are there, creating ways to making sure, and that's, and last political, making sure that people can get these services, in educating the folks, letting them know that let's not ignore, but let's deal with the stigma of mental health so that folks aren't afraid to go over and say, hi, I'm seeing a psychiatrist. Or to teach or tell young men that if you're depressed, it doesn't mean that you're weak. So there's a whole series of things we can do to educate ourselves, and one of the biggest things right now is this whole stigma around treating substance abuse. It is put in the criminal justice system. And we're not, if you're wealthy, then maybe you'll get treatment. But if you're not wealthy, well, you go to jail for a long time. So addressing substance abuse is a mental health and public health problem. And that's going, as we speak right now. I can read a newspaper right now. Why young men killers are the broken mental health system. Why people should be doing it's a broken mental health system. But that nobody wants to provide services to be able to address this so-called brokenness. So the answer is in front of us. We just have to act on it.
I would like to say thank you. Thank you, thank you. I am a proud member of the baby boomer generation, and I'm excited when we get a chance to talk about the past, the present, and our future. You talked a lot, I love how you talked about accepting who you are. As a baby boomer, we accept who we are. We accept everything, our hair, our skin color, our nose, our movement, our shifting, because that's where we were raised from the silent generation that prepared us. But I would like to know if you could talk a little bit about mental health in terms of generational years of poverty and illiteracy, how we don't deal with the guilt of shame, the guilt of body imaging, the guilt of colorism, the guilt, the things that would happen within black families that cause us to be who we are today. So if you could kind of talk a little bit about that's how we should begin to talk about. We're accepting ourselves in 2024, but we got some blood trauma that go back, that generations, grandmama and them, that's keeping us stuck in this box right now. And it's so nice that you have children and you can say, we got this order, we're going to flow and we're going to do this. But there are too many of us who are still stuck, and blood trauma is real. We don't talk about that. So can you talk a little bit about that? Thank you.
Well, I thought that the responses that Amber William and Faith gave to, the question about how do I talk to the family were excellent. And I know that it's really important, as Amber said, to do what you have to do for yourself. Because I've talked to too many, we just had a conversation, my husband and I, with someone when we were eating before the program started, a young woman who is 21 years old, whose mother for many, many years had an addiction to illegal drugs. And this young woman went into therapy. She's only 21 years old, but she's been in therapy for 3 years. And her mother has recently gotten into therapy. Now clearly the fact that she was in therapy spoke to her mother. I do writing workshops, and in one of my workshops, there's a woman who is a Jamaican immigrant, and she works with people in the immigrant community in DC around the trauma of being immigrants. And she had a very difficult relationship with her mother because of the separation. The typical thing, the parent comes, stays here for 7 or 8 years while they're trying to get the money together to bring the rest of the kids. During those 7 or 8 years, there's all kinds of isolation, anger, bitterness. And despite this very difficult relationship, when the mother was like 80 years old, she went into therapy. Now the fact that her daughter was a therapist, had been in therapy, and healed people like her, spoke to her. So I think it's really important what Amber said about do what you have to do for yourself and recognize that you are a model. People are always looking at you. Today's no can be tomorrow's I'm ready. And we always think, look, I said, let's go to the therapist. Let's go now. Put your coat on. People have to grow in their own time. It's really important to do what you have to do. And as Amber said, if you can't get Jane, get Joe. So I think that and the conversations that we have to have are not one-time conversations. They're conversations that we will have in the car, over sweet potato pie at Thanksgiving dinner. Somebody has to be brave enough at Thanksgiving to say, I'm in therapy.
Right.
And so you have the conversation a million different times. I know my husband gets on me about something. No. I'll be cussing him under a breath. No. And then finally, it'll set. I'll hear it. So keep the conversation going, and then know when you need to talk to somebody else. And it's fluid, it's energetic, it's dynamic. Just like the sister over here who wanted to demand that her meditation be a certain way. You can't demand that people respond, but keep it going. Keep it going.
And what I'll add to that, because I talk a lot about that in my work and with people that I work with and how I speak online, I call it intergenerational trauma, is I think what you're speaking to. And I think, so I'm a millennial and I was raised by boomers. And what I've noticed is that the way that millennials think about it or tend to think about it is that we have identified that there's this intergenerational trauma, exactly what you talked about, and we're wanting to figure out how do we fix it, but then also make sure that it doesn't continue beyond us. And so what I've learned and what I'm working with a lot of people is that the way to do it is exactly what we're saying. You identify it, you recognize how it made you feel. Now, what can you do in your lifetime that can shift the narrative for the next generation? And that's healing for the future generation, it's healing for you, but it also is healing for the past too. And so what I would say from a millennial's perspective, talking to an older generation, I think it's so important for people in the older generations to really share those stories. What I would say is, my parents are boomers, my mother is still alive, my father passed away, but what I would love is for them to actually talk to me about what happened and the bad things that happened. I want to hear about the traumas, I want to hear about the stressors, because of what I've noticed about the older generations is that there is that silence around these things. There's a lot of shame, there's a lot of guilt, and I think that, you know, my parents' generation feel like the way to raise good children is to protect them by being silent around a lot of these things. But for people in my generation, we want to hear it because we want to know how'd you get through it, and also how it's impacted us, and how do we make sure that we end it. So I would say that I think there needs to be more communication between the generations around the things that happen that we have been silent about, that we feel shame about, that we feel guilt about, without any pressure to fix it. We just need to talk about it, to bring it out and shed some light on it, and I think that can be really willing to.
Hi, I have a more of a statement. Hold it real close. More of a statement. Thank you for this panel. You all have been wonderful. And I am a baby boomer. And what I would like to say is Southeast has always had grocery stores, has always had supermarkets, Safeway and Giant, they have Whole Foods, they have everything. And the DC public schools, the trauma that you speak of, I work in DC public schools and in Southeast. And a lot of the times, what people don't understand is there is help. It's not that there is no help, it's plenty of help. DC is one of the very few places where, baby, if you got a problem, they got an answer for you. So I'm talking about for seniors, with home loans, with home care, everything, and with young people. But it's getting them to do it without trying to find a con, because these young people have known how to get over. When talking, there is a psychologist and social workers in every building. Every building. Okay, so there's no reason why they cannot get help. But what they're doing is using that to get over it, to get out of going back to prison or they got the ankle bracelet, they're trying to get out of detention, they're trying to get out of the group home, so they'll do what they're mandated to do, but not be honest and truthful. So there is help out there. And in DC, they have Unity, okay? If you got Medicare, you can go to any Unity clinic and get help. From dentistry to psychiatry, to psychology, to health with your baby, with everything. So it's not that it's not there, it's whether or not you choose to use it. And therein lies the problem, it's the choice.
And then that gets to, do you want to be well? Do you want to survive? Do you have a self-esteem that makes you go and take advantage? In the head. Thank you for that.
All right, we're going to do one last question, and we're going to go into books.
All right, quick question. Interventions for Black youth who are suicidal. DC has now, really the whole country, can y'all hear me and see me now? Interventions for Black youth who are suicidal. Major issue. Friend of mine who's a physician just contacted me yesterday. SAMHSA data has shown in DC it has increased faster than some other states. So you're right. I know, as I work for DC Department of Behavioral Health, so I know what's out there. And there is more help in DC than you'll find really in any other state. The proof is there, that's true. So I know I can back that up. The problem is, help is there, but people are not using it, and our youth are dying. So I want to know interventions that you all would have, even though I work in mental health, I want to hear what you all may, and I may be able to pick up something from you.
Well, since I'm in the 2-minute health clinics that we have, I just started a training program that is probably, the Department of Behavioral Health now, promoting suicide screening. But I was shocked to discover that many of our clinics simply do not use the standard screening tests to treat asthma or know how to use the existing screening instruments to be able to direct them to services. It's not just DC. I used to work in the VA system, and they did a very simple thing. They just went out there and ordered, and VA you can do that, ordered all the physicians to ask people, they gave them a little checklist. Do you feel suicidal? And they did it, got a nice long list. And what do you think happened? Nothing. I said, this says, your patient says it's suicide. What did you do about it? I put it in the file. So I think that seeing some starts, Dr. Badman, who's a psychologist also, by the way, and the new, working with the new medical director, Dr. Shepard, beginning to try to address those issues by not only the screening, but also beginning to train people on what to do about it. DC has an excellent system in terms of using peer counselors, but unfortunately many of them, and who are not professionals, are uncomfortable in talking about issues like suicide. So there's been a process of asking that. Again, not just DC. We had the same problem with some of our HBCUs. Our HBCUs have high rates of suicide. And when we go in, find the same kinds of issues. And that is that people refuse to believe it, don't believe that black people kill themselves. We had a case at a certain university here where somebody jumped off the building and the door was locked from the outside. And they said, how did they do that? They must have a helicopter dropped down and then locked it up. They had difficulty dealing with it or believing it. And this is part of a larger issue in our society, that the concept of suicide itself, especially for young people, is so threatening that we don't want to address it. It is now, African American men, statistics say we used to be at rock bottom in terms of suicide rates. African American women were under that way down. That's all changed. We caught up with everybody else and we bypassed it. And the problem is getting people awareness that this exists, and if they know about it, what to do about it. Well, we have a simple program to encourage people to talk about it, to recognize even lay people can go out and deal and work with people to deal with it. Many people who want to kill themselves are ambivalent to deal with that part that say let's not do it right now and take steps. So I see it as a work in progress, but it's going to take a little while. And just recognizing mental disorders itself is a problem. So recognizing that suicide is a consequence. One of the things that I wanted to find out was we have this DC is very high, again, drug overdose rate. How many of those folks are suicide? Unfortunately, once a person's expired, it's hard to get a good history. And so we have to, we don't know how many of those people really did just go and start using, but also saw this as a relatively pleasurable way of ending their lives. Excellent question, excellent point. The Department of Behavioral Health, as you found, you were so aware, is dealing with it. And again, we're working with, me, myself, Dr. Barnes and I, are working with several of the mental health clinics to educate the providers to start being aware of suicide.
If you asked me if I was suicidal, I think if I said yes, you were going to call the guys in the white coats immediately. So why would I, say yes, I am suicidal?
And the only other thing I'll add is I actually used to work in a school, a DC public school, and we actually implemented a program called SOS, it's called Signs of Suicide. And so that was really helpful because it essentially trains the staff, but then also the students for how to recognize signs of suicide within the peers, but then also the teachers are trained to know this is what you need to be listening for, for, and also this is the thing that you need to be doing for the student. So that is really helpful. But when I think about suicide as a clinician, and we are seeing the rates rise in Black youth, the big thing is hope. You know, hope is lost. Hope is at the core of whether someone is suicidal or not. And biggest intervention is, can we instill hope? But that's really hard when our youth and our communities, you know, yes, I hear we're saying that DC has a number of resources, and that is absolutely true, but it also has a great deal of trauma. And so when you're traumatized, it's hard to access those resources because of mistrust, because of so much unresolved issues that it just makes it hard to seek the help. But then also, why would you want to seek the help if you don't even see the goodness of your future? And that's what trauma can do. And so, you know, this is not an easy answer. This is really just more theoretical, but I think we're seeing this because so many of our youth have lost the idea that there is hope in their future. And if we can help them to see that a little bit more, whether it is engaging with them or getting more politically involved with, you know, making sure that things here are better or whatever it is, youth need to see that there is goodness in their future and there's hope in their future so that they will want to make it to their future.
If you or someone you know is in crisis, feel free to call or text 988, the National Mental Health Crisis and Suicide Prevention Lifeline. In the district, you can actually get mental health services 24/7. For children and youth ages 6 to 21, you can call 202-481-1440. For adults 21 and over, you can call 202-673-9319. Again, both of those numbers I gave are 24 hours, 7 days a week helplines. All right, I figured it would be good to throw that out there. And thank you. Now, can you give them a round of applause, please? And a big thank you to Ms. Marita Golden, who helped bring us all here together tonight. Thank you all so much for coming to Busboys and Faitth Brooks. We hope that you enjoyed your time. We will have books for sale outside, and I believe Faith and Marita will be available for signing. You're going to be signing up there. Yeah. I will be outside the doors with the books, so if you want, come see me, and if not, no worries. We hope you have a good rest of your day. Happy Black History Month.
If anyone who wants to get on my email list, I have a sign-up sheet. I'll put it over here where you can sign up to get on my email list. Thank you. This program was extraordinary. I mean, I knew it was going to be great, but let's give them another hand.